Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2-for-1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
And today is episode 140 of Podcast 2-for-1, and we are talking House of the Dragon.
Ooh-wee mama.
Ooh-wee mama. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way, you're up to date on all future episodes of Podcast 2-for-1, as well as the cool content we have at YouTube, at 2-for-1 Studios, youtube.com/2for1 Studios, the best place to consume the content. Ooh, almost messed up there. And if you didn't know, and you probably didn't, guys, let's just be honest, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas, where they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and, of course, special guest appearances throughout the year.
Kapow.
Kapow. Daniel, 140 episodes, and we have talked about news-like things of Game of Thrones. We have made slight comments about the last season, particularly the last few episodes of Game of Thrones.
Did we not even review it? We didn't talk.
We've never reviewed. No, we've never reviewed a Game of Thrones anything.
Was Game of Thrones? We had started the podcast already by the time
Game of Thrones had ended before Game of Thrones ended before we started the podcast.
Okay.
Some almost 3 years ago.
Sense.
Almost exactly 3 years ago. So we're at House of the Dragon, and I got to tell you, going like when they announced it, I was like, well, of course you did. I don't know why it wasn't announced the day after the finale. The last one ended. When money's there,
I do. I know why it wasn't announced after the finale.
But you know what I mean, though. And so, it's one of those things like, okay, well, I don't know if I'll ever watch Game of Thrones ever again. The ending was so piss poorly managed, in my opinion, that I was like, I don't know. I can't even go back and watch the series now, building up to where I know where it's going to end. And so it's just like, it's hard for me. But I was like, well, I'm going to give it another shot because I like the world and I like the tone and the atmosphere and the politics and that kind of stuff. And I got to say, this first season, every episode, I think is pretty fantastic. And some episodes are better than others, but I think overall, like, the worst episode of the season is still better than probably 99% of most television going on. And I have a lot of thoughts about just the direction and the tone and the time jumps and all these things. But I got to say, man, it's I hate it and I love it that they pulled me back in. So I'm hoping that they keep the train going. And if they keep giving me content like this, then maybe we can forgive the finale to Game of Thrones.
No, we will never forgive that. That will be a forever.
Maybe.
The issue is, and I'll say like this, the worst part of this show is every time they mention A Song of Ice and Fire and allude to the events of Game of Thrones and the prince that was promised, that was Jon, which, by the way, did nothing to it was his little sister that beat the Night King. So like they're literally quoting a prophecy that didn't actually take place, but they're pretending like it did.
I had one thing I mentioned, I think, in the beginning when the first episode dropped. I have one thing that they could totally fix everything, but we'll get to that later.
Okay. Yeah, so that will never. I'm sorry. I mean, this season was amazing, but nothing will erase the disappointment of season 8, other than like remaking it. Like that's really the only thing. And the problem is they don't need to remake it. They need to turn that season into like 2 seasons at least. So it'll never happen, ever. But House of Dragon, absolutely like you coming into it, was burned to hell by season 8 of Game of Thrones. It's the worst. To me, it's the most disappointing end to any show ever. Not because there's been worse finales.
There has been
shows, but there's never been a better show. There's never been one of the best shows of all time that has had a worse finale. Like Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad. You think of like pinnacle of TV. Yeah, they all have really good finales. This one,
I always look at it like
antithesis.
This is equivalent to the Glass or the Unbreakable trilogy with M. Night Shyamalan and Ding Dong. And I think those first two movies are pretty fantastic, at least in terms of that world and tone. And watching a third movie is just like watching Game of Thrones at the end there. It's like watching someone who's been in a competition for a year and they've been in 9.9s and 10s all day long, and they're doing the backflip. It's like perfect. It's like they're just doing such a good job. And then right when they land, they like stumble. It's like watching a tragedy in slow motion.
It's like right when they land, the floor gives way and they fall into the core of the earth and die in molten lava. That's season 8.
What happened? They go through the core and they go back the other side of Earth and into space.
That's right.
Yeah, and so,
that's season 8. And so, and you know what was so great about early Game of Thrones, right? The writing was impeccable. And I'm not just talking about the season-long arcs. Those were great and handled really well. I'm talking about like the day-to-day dialogue between characters. There was so much nuance in everything in certain characters that, you know, like Tyrion or what's his name? The Master of Spies. I'm blanking on his name. There was everything they said was a riddle to something else, and it was really good dialogue, and really it felt real to the world.
Stranger Things season 4, that guy.
He was Littlefinger. Oh, no, Littlefinger.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I thought Man of Many Faces, who I was thinking of. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, he's great too. Even though that season isn't great, I still liked him. But
and
you know,
it went nowhere.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it was used for one death, and then it was never mentioned again. So yeah, I think, and the later seasons of Game of Thrones, because they were having to condense plot to unrealistic pacings, they had to condense, like every line of dialogue had to be like expository, and there was no time to have characters just talk to each other and have like a conversation that all it does is maybe explore a side of that character's personality, because the plot was flying at such a ridiculous pace. Every conversation had to be plot moving, you know what I mean? And so things felt less realistic. Things felt less what we got with early seasons, which was like slow, deliberate payoffs to like long arcing like themes or like things that were going on. All of a sudden, payoffs happened the next scene after they set it up at the end of this show, right? Like it just turned into sloppy, just kind of like the writing was there to get to the end, not to tell a good story. Right. And we know that because they were offered Star Wars, and it was Game of Thrones, or HBO wanted at least 2 more seasons, and they said no, 1. So like, yeah. What House of Dragon does is it returns to that form of early Game of Thrones. The dialogue is impeccable. The acting is impeccable. The pacing, even though I will say at times the amount of years we were jumping sometimes felt a little jarring. Overall, the pacing was really expertly crafted, and the way that the season climaxed up towards the end felt really good. I will just mention that the finale, I maybe thought my expectations were just expecting maybe a little bit bigger things to happen. Just because I don't think any of us knew what season 2 was going to be. They could jump another 50 years. So who knows? I mean, the whole war could happen in the finale. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't know. And so even it was a fantastic finale. I think my expectations were maybe set a little too high. But
we do that a lot here at Podcast.
Fantastic season.
Yeah. No, I think, everything you said, I 100% agree with. Big thing I think is interesting is you said that the time jumps and the pacing in the last season or 2 of Game of Thrones is unrealistic in comparison, or unrealistic, right? And that's mainly in comparison to the beginning, right, where we were slow, methodical, and we were following a lot of different characters.
Well, just as an example, season 1, it took the Starks almost the entire season to like 3 or 4 episodes to travel from the north to King's Landing.
Right.
And like literally they get there at the final episode and watch their father get like beheaded, right? Like
Right.
that's the plot. It took they literally did that like between scenes in episodes. Like
Yeah.
the beginning of
Well-
the episode, they were in the north, and by the end, even though like time seemed to be going at the same place, like normally in other scenes, it was like they just showed up, and it was just, and that's just an example of like it got a little lazy, or at least I wouldn't even say it got lazy. They intentionally started cutting corners to get to the plot ending they wanted to get,
Right. And my
which
main
is more
point here-
egregious.
Yeah, my main point here is that the first 3 or 4 episodes of House of the Dragon, we jumped more time in those first 3 or 4 episodes of House of the Dragon than we did the entire show of Game of Thrones, right?
100%. Yep.
But the difference between that and this is expectation and consistency.
Yes.
They're out of the gate. Hey, they told us before the show aired there would be time jumps. So they
Yes.
told us that first of all. And also the big thing is there's less characters to follow, at least in the beginning. They end up kind of spawning more that you kind of like, oh, whose names is who kind of thing, but that's kind of part of Game of Thrones.
I agree.
But sorry, I'm coughing too. I've been having a cough lately. But the other thing is, you mentioned this early on, I think, when you first started watching it and catching up to where I was at. You said it reminded you of a show like The Crown, in which it's like a historical epic and not something
Yes.
we're following these characters in their day-to-day life, right? You would imagine, at least I would imagine, that it's almost like reading a history book, right? Where nothing great happens every 3 days in history. There's probably good 5-year
Right.
stints where just mundane, horrible life is happening, and people are just doing everything they can to survive. And there's the
Yes.
boring. Everyone's going to eat, sleep, and fuck and whatever, right? So
Yes.
that's like the boring stuff. But then every 5, 10, 20 years, there's going to be a civil war. There's going to be a revolution. There's going to be someone killing or assassinating a prince or a king. That's just like history. Like every chapter is like every 15, 20 years or something in history, right?
Yes.
It's not always that way, but that's just a broad stroke sort of thing, especially the farther in history you get back, because we have less and less documentation on that kind of stuff. So that's what this show felt like to me. It felt like a historical recount of Game of Thrones, and particularly the Targaryen house and their maybe not the peak of their power, but maybe somewhere it's waning. But I like that we're seeing the most interesting things happening, and also that we're not it would take the whole 7 seasons to get to just one of the kids being born. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, if we went like the Game of Thrones timeline, so like I like that we're seeing the kids grow up in it. And I think if they do it smart enough, and I think they have, 2 to 3 episodes is plenty of time for a moment in time or a period in time with all the characters. It's like watching basically like 3 or 4 movies in a season, right? Like we can do that with movies. Every 2.5 hours could be like a moment in time, and we pick up in a sequel that could be 6 months or 3 years or 10 years down the road. It's the same concept, but we're getting it in a TV format, an hour a piece, or across 10 episodes of whatever the episode count is. But I think in terms of the time stuff, I think it works. And I think I've read that going forward in season 2, there are not going to be any more time jumps. We're going to live with this cast of characters, which kind of makes sense.
Did they say like for the rest of the show, or just with season 2? Do you know if they made a distinction?
I don't remember. I want to say my instinct was rest of the show, but
that's what I feel like. But
I think that they should do. I almost think they should just do season 2 will be these characters, because I feel like we've kind of reached a pinnacle with like family conflict with these characters, and now we got to see like kind of the aftermath and like where those collide. And then I think season 3 would be smart to jump another 20, 30 years and then kind of see almost like a repeat of season 1. Like you have whoever the next in line is, they're older, they're a king now, and then now they're dealing with, what I'm saying? Like I think that would be a smart way to kind of progress it, and also cover, and they may want to have 5 more spinoffs to cover the 150 years leading up to Game of Thrones. But I still think that I like it. I mean, I don't know. I like that idea anyway.
Yeah, I think it's just a different flavor. I feel like it's it's even different than Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones almost felt more like an epic, or like an Odyssey, like a retelling of like a legend, like Odysseus or something like this legendary tale of the great war of the North or whatever it was. And then, you know, on the other side, which we'll be talking about in a couple weeks, Rings of Power feels much more like a fairy tale. Just straight up, it's got magic everywhere. It's accepted. Everyone just operates and talks and acts like they're storybook characters and they're fairy tale characters,
Right.
which is its own flavor. I would say even like the Peter Jackson original trilogy of Lord of the Rings feels like a fairy tale. It feels like a dark fairy tale. And I think that's part of the reason it's appeal. And I think, but like that is not to say it's one is better than the other, right? I still think the original Peter Jackson trilogy is the best high fantasy we've ever seen, like as a total package in terms of the looks to the story, everything, the acting. But yeah, House of Dragon is this really interesting, I think, like I mentioned before, like it feels more like the Crown, where we're skipping to these important beats of history and getting to see like you know, like almost like in a History Channel kind of reenactment thing of like what this looked like when this big moment happened, or that big like legendary historical moment happened, right? And I think I enjoy that flavor of drama, especially, and I think, you know, this is a good opportunity to transition into like how well acted all of these characters are. Like this show is just done at a ridiculously high level from the writing to the production side, but the acting, the casting is again, like I don't know how they keep doing it, but Game of Thrones consistently finds nobodies that have done nothing, and they were casted and they are perfect, and now they have careers. You know what I mean? Like, and so I mean, specifically highlighting Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke, which they've been in a couple of things, but they were fantastic. I'm not going to say it. Ewan Mitchell, who plays Aemon Targaryen, the man with the shape, the face of an arrowhead.
Sure, in the later episodes, yeah. He's like
the best casting,
the best casted villain of all time.
And the eye patch and everything. It's just like he looks.
His chin could shatter dimensions.
You could, yes,
it's
you could
crazy.
like you could like cut diamonds with his chin.
Oh,
and but he just has a natural look of like deviousness on his face. Just is natural. They say people have resting bitch face. He has like resting devious face. You know.
I think obviously I think the women do an amazing job in the show. But I got to give it to my boy Matt Smith and Patty Considine. Matt Smith, you know, I've always respected him for his Doctor Who lineage and just everything I've seen him in. He's always done a great job, but he's he's built for this role, and just seeing him, it's like watching the bad kid. Like, what are they going to do next? What's Daemon going to do next? You know, and like he's also a badass. Like he's a badass, and I think there might be some issues with his later stuff in the show, but I still think it's amazing. I just think like I question some of his passivity later on, comparatively. But him, and then the guy playing King Viserys the second, I believe, or the first, maybe it's the first.
Yeah, it's Patty Considine.
Patty Considine. He was phenomenal.
My God,
this guy, this king who
specifically the penultimate episode 9.
Oh,
was just
just a guy who
one of the best really performances I've seen on TV, on screen.
He doesn't want to be. I'm getting chills. He doesn't want to be king. He's just a guy who wants his family to be together. He really just wants to fucking build models and read. He's a nerd. He wants to read comic books. You know, build models. You know, but he's unfortunately king and. He just wants his family to be whole, and it's like this
long shot thing. Where he's walking up to the throne, like the king will attend this matter, and then like that just long, slow walk. It's just this deafening silence in the room. Yeah. Like the Otto Hightower won't make eye contact. Like it's just like this.
So good.
And he's got that iron gold mask on, and he just looks, for one, kind of bad. Like it's like. This like the spirit of this man that is like helping him persevere when his body is like utterly failing him.
Which there is a cool callback there later. I think it's Jason Momoa's character. I can't think of his character name now.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but no,
But he like pours the gold on Viserius the Third or something on his face. He's like, great one liner. Here's your crown or whatever he says, and like it molds to his face just like Viserius the First did. Yeah, good callback there. Good foreshadowing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think the women here, like I think it's what's interesting too is this cast change. As we got older, and I think the what's her name? Is it Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook? They did an amazing job.
Older
They're fantastic.
purple.
They did an amazing job.
Emma Darcy to me, like I think Olivia Cook was amazing. Like she plays like a mom.
She looked just like the other
casting
girl.
Was perfect.
But
perfect.
Don't you think? Here's my question. Don't you think that they could have just aged up the other two girls? I mean, like I'm not saying that it's a bad
maybe
thing.
the middle one, the middle age.
Think,
there was 3. Wasn't there 3 Rhaenyra's? Or was just 2?
There's 2.
Okay.
The first one was Millie Alcock. And she was the first.
No, I mean, I don't think like I do think you probably could have with Emily. I don't think you could have with Millie. I think her face just looks so petite and tiny. Like she just looks like a child still, I think, to me.
Okay.
But I will just say I think Emma Darcy killed it. Like her just
fantastic.
Her acting and like the way she just does her facial expressions are just it's so like natural but also like very unique. Like almost like in that like she's so expressive with her face as she's like talking and performing and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too because like they obviously use a lot of English actors in their shows and English
they're
actors. Well, yeah, some think that. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's. If you think of the best actors of all time, a lot of them are English.
I think it's just the accents. They just sound smarter than us.
Well, I think a big part of it is that like to be an actor in England, you have to go through the theater. The only route to movies or TV. Like if you don't go to the theater, you're not really considered a serious actor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even returning to it later is like seen as like a higher calling. But so I do think I just want to also lastly add Matt Smith again. You were right. I feel like I discovered Matt Smith watching Doctor Who. He was the first Doctor Who doctor I ever watched, and so he's like kind of my doctor over like David Tennant. Sure. And I've only seen a bit of David Tennant. I've seen all of Matt Smith and all of Peter Capaldi. But
it's coming back, by the way.
He is, I know.
Interesting.
But it is so fun seeing Matt Smith like become this like. I mean, he was already successful, but you have to think this is only going to just elevate his career. Beyond being in Morbius. You know what I mean?
Oh God!
No, he was. Now the funny thing is, he's also in The Crown and plays one of the young kings in The Crown.
Right. Yeah. He was also in Terminator Genesis, and he was.
Okay.
He was basically Skynet incarnate. And
okay. Like as a Terminator still though?
Yeah, well, it's like a Legion situation. He is Skynet kind of thing. And that never panned out. And
he does a good villain, honestly.
He does.
Something about his way he talks. Face. It is. He's kind of got that sharp, pointy face as well. But
then again, on Doctor Who's side, he can be very whimsical and charming.
Oh man, he's my favorite Doctor. He's very childlike, but then he's like childlike, but then if you get on his wrong side, it's like that childlike, but you can see behind his eyes there's a lot of pain and darkness, and when you get that let out, it's like get out of the fucking way. Like he becomes bad fucking ass in that show. Like I get chills from some of his like one-liners and like fuck you moments, dude. They're just like, and I think because he is all the time so like kind and light, when it does get that way, it's like smacks you across the face.
I will say this: Millie Alcock and the other Emily Carey, them being recast, even though it is, I think they probably could have aged them up or whatever. I'm not upset with it. I think the other actresses did an amazing job. They look pretty damn close to them. I will say the only time it bothered me was Fabian Frankel, who played Sir Christian Cole. He was basically, it seemed like Millie, Rhaenyra's love interest in the beginning and ended up becoming almost like Olivia's side man or whatever in the end.
It was
I thought
confusing if it was in. I never got the clear impression that they were actually doing it, or if because the reason he hated her was because like she made him like break his oath and like not be a virgin anymore or whatever.
I guess so, but like. But what's so weird is that he looked so similar. I almost was like, wait, are we in the right timeline?
Well,
like, I didn't know where we were. Because, like, he looks exactly the same.
I feel like Matt Smith is equally as egregious. I don't think Matt Smith looks all they do is change his hair. All they do is change his hairstyle. It's not as
bad. The guy, so what was interesting was the guy who was the new squeeze for Rhaenyra in the one who dies in that Hightower kills. Yeah. I thought that was Fabian. Because it looks like the older version of Fabian. He's got a beard and like he's training people. I was like, I thought that was him. And then, but then I was like, oh wait, no, Fabian's still here. Also, anyway, give him a beard at least. Like, give him something, make him look older. But they didn't. That was my only.
They made his hair shorter, but yeah.
I guess. I mean, it's only egregious. Also, great actor here is Rhys Ifans, who plays Lizard in Amazing Spider-Man. He does many better things than that too. But
which one is he?
Point him out. He played Ottawa Hightower.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's fantastic.
And I also want to throw out Matthew Needham played Larry Strong.
Yes, Larry Strong.
Ooh, such a fun character. Such a fun character. God.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I'll say this. A show is good, and also just it heightens my enjoyment of it is when after every episode, there's like 10 or 12, 10 out of 10 memes that come out of every episode. Every 100%. Episode. Yeah. And like, it's like, there's just, it shows firing on all cylinders.
I will say, if we're highlighting characters we liked, there's one character that I did not like, and it was almost completely down to her accent. And that was the Missaria lady that was like she was like the lady like was like but the way she talked, it sounded like someone doing a bad fake European accent. It's like, what to tell you? It was just like this weird thing, and every time she just sounded dumb. And I think if they had just changed the accent, it would have benefited her like 200%.
She's the one that was in probably the best episode of this season. Is she the one that was like negotiating, like, you're going to do this with my brothels or whatever, or stop the brothels? Okay.
Like when she was negotiating to return the other guy because they were trying to find him. Yeah, the other brother.
Yeah, you're right. And like, let's talk about that. So that episode might be the best episode of the season.
Is that the?
Opinion. It's the.
No, I'm sorry. That's that. So you're talking about the penultimate episode, the episode right after the king dies.
Yeah, I mean, like, in terms of just structure and just like what everyone is doing, it felt like a political thriller. Like everyone like is gunning, and they're people are hitting the streets. There's people making negotiations. Like, all these pieces are trying to be moved into place, and like without trying to alert Rhaenyra about the death of the king. It felt like a political thriller, and 100%. Like, it felt like watching a David Fincher episode of Game of Thrones or something.
It was very fast paced, very quickly, like just we were moving along.
And it was just all these, like, even like Alicent versus her dad Hightower, like like who gets the king first, and this king is like a fucking twerp.
Or and then I love the
jacking off in the front of the city, and it's just like it's kind of the boys, it seemed like, but.
And then like Aemon's little side plot where we see how envious he is of his brother's right to the crown, and
100%
multiple times while they're there has these moments where you're like, is he gonna
kill him,
or is he gonna or the brother's like, please let me leave, you'll never see me again, and he has that moment where he almost does it. And I think that's the kind of layers this show does, where everything there's nothing's black and white, nothing's simple. Everyone has their own, kind of motives and objectives. And like, I think it just, I agree. It was a great episode. I think I will say my favorite one is the one before. I think King Viserys' final episode is just haunting and beautiful. And I think, I think Patty, I liked him. I thought he was great up to that point, but he that one performance, that episode elevated my opinion of his performance to like maybe top of the show, maybe second. I mean, I do think Emma Darcy is really good. I think, but yeah, I think when I think of like whose performance stood out,
Yeah.
I think it's him, and it's 90% because of one episode, and I think that's pretty crazy.
I mean, gun to my head, I can't really disagree on that. But
and
no,
I will say I saw a quote from the actor saying that he loved this because this was all a love story. And the first episode was the day he lost his love. And it was just the story of grief after that for him. When his wife dies in child because of his choice to do the C-section. And like basically his story is that happens the very beginning, and we're just watching his deterioration from that moment on. I think that's
the thing
really
we kind of point out and talk about here is the gratuitous nature of what Game of Thrones represents on TV.
Yeah.
And I think that there's always that kind of thing. Okay, we're Game of Thrones. It's in our title. People, there's a certain level of expectation of violence and visceral imagery and that kind of stuff. But
nudity,
and nudity even. But I felt a restraint from the showrunners in a positive way. There wasn't a lot of nudity, like unnecessary nudity. I feel like it was always servicing the story, and at least the sex part of it was. And then I think that the violence part, I feel like they weren't just doing it every episode to be in your. I feel like early Game of Thrones, it was like sex all the time. I feel like it was sex and violence.
Well,
constantly.
it wasn't just that it was sex a lot. It was how they shot it, right? Like every sex scene pans over a nude woman's body as we find the subject, or like it was always like highly like just plotless sex scenes, just. Just we're just putting the woman's body on display, and that is the point of this scene, more or less. And I don't think we had that. We still had sex scenes, but they were, I think, a little more tasteful, and then I think also just
well, I feel like they had perspective, also like a character perspective versus an audience perspective.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and I even just like Daemon fighting the I don't know what his name is. I'm gonna call him the Water King, whatever his name is. Like all that stuff is great. It's like that's where the violence can come in, and it also brings to this like one cool thing that when they showed up on Game of Thrones, I was like, fuck yeah, is the dragons. And this show is called House of the Dragons, and so it's like they look fantastic, of course.
It's nice that they're all around all the time. We get dragons like every episode, and it's like multiple kinds, multiple I mean, the show ends on like a climactic dragon fight. You know what I mean? Like, I agree. It's because for one, it took a while for us to even get dragons in Game of Thrones. It wasn't until like the end of season 1, I don't think, before she even maybe got the dragon eggs or they hatched or whatever.
I think they hatched in season 1. They hatched.
Okay, and then we would be with them 1/3 of the time, because that was about the much time we spent with Daenerys per season. But now it's like everyone's got a dragon. Everyone's got a dragon, and we're just dragon threats and everyone's a dragon rider, and I think that's cool too. I think
Well, I think it also brings up another important point. It's like we mentioned earlier that we were following so many different perspectives in the early Game of Thrones, and like the parts that I really liked about Game of Thrones, like just like the thing I like about Star Wars sometimes is the politics of it all. You have like the characters where you're following the mythical, and you're following like kind of the funnier people. You have the the wall, and then you have the politics. But this show is basically just all politics, and
it's about one family. I mean, like one extended family, but like I think you're right. The scope of this show is smaller in terms of this is about one family and the series of events that occurs between this one family. For however long we'll see. But I think there's something about that just really gives them the space to do a lot of good and to service these characters well, right? Like they can take their time to set things up. They have plenty of time to, like I said, have these side conversations that might not move the plot forward, but that really show us characters or give us an insight into their perspective or the psychology. And I think so far it really feels like it's benefiting the show to just,
Yeah.
Of course we mention the Starks and we mention, the
Baratheons,
the
yeah.
Tyrians or the Lannisters,
The Lannisters, yeah.
the Valerians and all of that kind of stuff, and that's fun because like we especially because we just kind of already have that world building kind of known to us, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one family, and it feels like they're able to just do things very tightly, right? They're just able to hyper focus on one thing and do it really, really, really well versus having to kind of juggle all these different plots and characters. And I think so far that seems to be benefiting the show. I'm excited to see how that progresses.
I think one negative to the time jumps, other than the recasting and that kind of stuff, which is not really negative, it's just a personal preference, I think, on that one.
Sure.
Is there are cases sometimes where, at least those first batch of episodes, right, when we're in a different time period, there's some cases you have to do. And also I felt this way in a lot of Game of Thrones or just HBO shows in general. And I think it's fun, but I always watch the behind the scenes after every episode, whether it be Succession or Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon or whatever. I always love hearing the showrunners and the cast members talk about the episode and like how they shot it and just like what the intent was. And there's sometimes I feel like I almost rely on those sometimes too much in terms of like, well, why were these decisions made or whatever? One of those being just an example. Allison Hightower in the later episodes, I think the penultimate, when she's more in control, she's basically the king or the queen, and fully, she is like now adopted the religion part of it, right? And the whole tower looks different, like stuff like that. Like it's like I saw it. I heard the comments from Daemon and Rhaenyra when they arrived at the castle, but like it was one of the things that kind of I glossed over, and it was more the showrunners kind of filling me in and putting more of a bow on it, right? The greens versus the whatever it is, the blues or whatever. So
yeah,
I think there is loss sometimes there in terms of like, we're inferring things, or we're, at least on my end, maybe I'm just not as observant, at least on a first watch through, but
it's difficult to jump 10 years and there not be a little bit of clunkiness in how you have to do a little bit of re-exposition, right? You kind of you have to tell us what's happened without just looking at the camera and telling us what's happened, and that's a difficult thing for really. I feel like that in of itself is one of the more difficult things in writing in general to do, is to effectively and entertainingly and without boring your reader tell them things that have already happened in a smooth, concise way. And I think that wasn't perfect. I think there was a little bit of, like you said, like I feel like the first 10 or 15 minutes even of those episodes felt a little bit like we had to find a way to tell you some of this stuff. But again, when the acting is as good as it is, when everything looks as good as it does, and when
cinematography is amazing.
Once we're past that, we're right into our old flow and into the good normal like natural pacing. It can be forgiven, right? Like this show isn't a masterpiece, right? Like I feel like some of the seasons this season, I would say some of the seasons of Breaking Bad feel like masterpieces. Like there's not a second or frame of wasted anything. Everything connects. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing images in the beginning of the season that you don't understand till the end. Like just like there's just, it feels like it was so thought out, and just like everything was they did as many drafts as they took until it was like perfect. And I feel like there is a little bit of the clunkiness in the writing sometimes with this, but it does everything else at such a good level that like it's still, like you said, better than 99% of what's on TV.
It is.
And it's giving me what I want out of Game of Thrones, which is good politics, interesting gray characters, surprising plots, and just not knowing what's going to happen next, kind of edge of your seat entertainment. It's doing all of that, and it seems like we're gonna get more. And I have to think these showrunners have been painfully aware of the hill they were up against from the beginning with this show, even thinking about the end, right? I hope they have already like mapped out the end like verbatim, You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I hope that we're going into this thinking not only do we start well, let's make sure it ends really, really, really well. So
sorry for that sound effect. That was my refrigerator being a dickhead. But I agree with you, and I will say this. One, we lost one showrunner of the two.
yep,
It didn't,
saw that.
so that's it. So we'll see how do we lose the better of the two, or do we lose? You just don't know yet. So we'll see kind of what happens.
Nope.
The series premiere was watched by over 10 million viewers, the biggest in
Wow.
HBO's history, which is solid for a premium
which is also
format
probably
channel.
reflective that they've never had more subscribers in history either,
Right.
Like
Sure.
there's never been more people than now that have access to HBO. Like HBO used to be premium service, and now it's just on the par of Netflix. HBO is just like Netflix.
Yeah, which
it used to be
sidebar
expensive.
Discovery or whatever you want to, Warner Brothers Discovery, whatever you want to call yourself, please do not destroy HBO Max. Just use that as your branding. No one cares about the Discovery brand.
No,
Make HBO Max the place and have Discovery as a fucking tab or hub on the HBO Max app.
I'm less that I agree, but I'm less. If you have to do some of that shit, fine. But whatever you do, whoever is responsible for how good HBO's premium like original content is, if they leave, you're fucked. So you better make sure they are there, and you're still getting more Game of Thrones, more Watchmen, more The Wire, more what's the next Sopranos. Like that's the reason HBO is as relevant as they are. Let's
pull it down to like a base level here. Is that I think the interface is by far the best looking, the easiest to find stuff. It's also just aesthetically pleasing. I think
I like Disney Netflix Plus is a little better.
One thing I saw over the weekend or during Halloween was like they had a Halloween section, right? And there was tarot cards of like romance, devils, ghost, whatever. And you'd click on the tarot card and flip over to like, here's 5 movies that follow under romance. It was just like a clever, and just like they used different shapes other than just rectangles and squares. And like, they were just like, it just felt, it aesthetically pleasing to the eye. I feel like surfing a website, but like with your phone, I don't know, just
sure.
It felt nice and pretty in the colors. And Disney Plus, I think, is actually, the more I dive into, like, it's always been easy for me because of Marvel, but now that I'm watching a lot of Cocomelon or whatever, watching a lot of all these other baby TV shows, I'm searching for animated movies, and it's so difficult to find like a nice curated way of, like, it feels like it's just vomit of like content.
Yeah, I agree. It's not. It's like the search features aren't very good in Disney Plus, and like it's like it looks good and it like sometimes feels good, but it's very buggy too. I found. I've had bugs where I've had to like restart the app several times to get shows to work and stuff like that.
Don't be wrong. Netflix
but can we all agree that Amazon Prime is literally the worst? And like, I don't know what their deal is, but like, it feels like you're navigating a web browser on an Xbox when you're using like a control. Like, it feels like I pulled up Safari or Internet Explorer on my Xbox and I typed in AmazonPrime.com. That's how bad the interface is.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah. And then Hulu, just fucking commercials, man. Come on.
Yeah. You can pay premium, not getting commercials.
The problem is I can't because I have Hulu through my Spotify. Because I got that like when I was a student. And so I pay like I pay like $9.99 for Hulu and Spotify. And that's like cheaper than you can get anywhere else, but I can't upgrade.
Well, you can bundle your Disney Plus and your Hulu together for a cheap premium as well.
I'm just ready for Disney to take all their shit off of Hulu and put it on Disney Plus. That to me is just annoying. It's like you have your own thing. I
fucking hate it too. Yeah, I hate it too. I mean, I can't imagine why they wouldn't eventually, but
contracts. I mean, at least for now, right? There's probably pre-existing contracts.
I guess I don't know, man. I would love everything to be one tub and just kids section, adult section.
It's like I want the world to exist like there's only one super mega company that owns everything and supplies everything. I don't want to actually live in that world because of like all the scary implications and like probably the downfall of humanity being shortly after that. But I want the convenience of it. So it's it's kind of like
I understand. I will say, last thing for ask for like my final question
Sure.
is the thing that the saving grace. I think I'm a wishful viewer or fan of Game of Thrones, the original show, and when they were bringing up the Song of Ice and Fire and how one of the Aegon the Conqueror saw a vision, and that's the prince that was promised would destroy it. All these things, I feel like a lot of that, not retconning, but it felt like these people don't seem that stupid for making the show. And it's easy to look back on the last episode or last 2 episodes and say the prince that was promised did not destroy the Night King. And so I kind of hope and wonder if we do get a Jon Snow show, are they going to resurrect the Night King and have a final proper battle between the two? Like I wonder like
that would be if they could do it right. If they could make it not feel like a fan, almost like fanfic retcon, because there's a danger it could really feel that way. It could feel that way.
It will be that. But if he's going beyond the wall,
it's fan fiction. If you're saying Daemon and Linda, the D&D, the guys who were the showrunners are the holders of whatever you call it,
sure,
canon. If you're saying what they do is canon, but there's already reports that like Martin has said like my ending's different.
Yeah, no, he said that from the beginning when they were gearing up for the last season. He just reported last week, which is the timing's great, that he's 3/4 done with the last book, which he's been working on for 10+ years.
Man, I just hope he doesn't look like a
healthy person,
healthy guy. Just like I hope you survive. I really do. Like for all of us.
Honestly, my big thing though is I've done some research on some other bigger. Actually, here's a book right here called The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and it's supposed to be like one of the best high fantasy books or mythologies of all time. My brother's into it, and my stepdad's into it.
It's like a fiction series.
Yeah, and it's it spans like even different planets and whatever. But like on this particular part of the story and planets, it's like high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff. And
is it
and there's even like I've only like a few pages in, but I did a lot of research on this guy, and this guy is considered one of the best like fantasy writers of all time. But he hasn't really had his day in court yet. But he did go in. The guy who wrote the Wheel of Time, which is a huge fantasy series, right? That's on Amazon Prime now, which apparently sucks.
I've liked it, but she didn't. She's not a fan of the book. She's never read the books though. So I've heard that people like it that have never read the books.
Yeah. Well, he went in and he took the notes. The guy passed away before he could finish the last book in the show and the series. And this series has been going on for forever, right? Like there's a lot of books. Gotcha. He went in and he finished it for him with his notes and stuff. And everyone praised him, like how good of a job he did and all these things. And I sit here and I think there will be somebody. It won't be Martin that finished it, but somebody somewhere, maybe
right.
Brandon
probably his
himself
estate will like commission someone.
Will finish it with notes, and you bet your ass he has notes. He's had to have conversations with them.
Well, isn't there supposed to be another book after this one too? Like this isn't the last.
Yeah. The last there's the Winds of Winter, which is being written right now for like again 10+ years, and then the last one is a Dream of Spring is the last one.
Yeah. So I mean, I have a good feeling. I mean, just at least as of now, because of his progress, it feels like this one he might get done.
This one will get done, I think.
But yeah, the last one you were. I mean, if we're talking another 10-year wait, that then we're talking a long time. But yeah, no, I mean, back to House of Dragon and Game of Thrones. I think, like I said, I'm not sure they'll ever be able to do anything to really completely wash away the blemish that was season 8 of Game of Thrones. That show, there's never been a show that was more on top of the world than that show in period. Like I don't know if there's ever been a show that was as popular as that was at its height, at least amongst like adults. It felt like Pokemon for kids. Everyone watched Game of Thrones.
Dude, I was just dumbfounded, man. Like even with like the penultimate episode with the Night King and everything else, I was just sitting there like, how do you not have Jon kill the Night King? Like
Yeah, and
That's his whole purpose of the show. I could see. Well, this is what happened. I could see someone in the writing room go, "Well, we're going to subvert expectations, even though we've been
sure.
giving fan service now for a little bit the last couple of episodes. We're going to do that, and we're going to save his big moment for killing Daenerys, and
Which I think she is the most disserviced. Her and Tyrion are the most disserviced characters of the show with that last season. Two just amazing characters, like pinnacles of why this show is great. You know what I mean? And they are reduced to just really flimsy, confusing characters. I think it's that thing of like, I actually don't mind the plot points at an abstract level. I think Daenerys being eventually worn down by the burdens of leadership and having some sort of mental break, and there being a similar sort of finale where it's Jon having to stop her, whether or not you still kill her or not, that I think is a really interesting thing to do. But to do that to defeat the Night King last episode and to do all of that in the last 2 episodes, to condense all of the character development that would be needed to make that feel good, the progression of her kind of deteriorating under this heavy burden, and that was all so rushed. It just felt spoon-fed plot. You know what I mean? And then
I don't feel that one was as egregious as some of the other ones.
I think Daenerys was an amazing character that made the season 8 made her feel dumb. Season 8 made her feel like bipolar. Like yesterday you were just like high-fiving and helping us murder the bad guys, and today you're murdering children. What happened?
I don't 100% disagree. I like 10% disagree. I think you're pretty much 90% correct on all this. I feel like if you watch it all back to back, which I did leading up to it again, I feel like it's a little more there. Maybe I was extrapolating too because I already know what was going to happen, but I feel like it's not as egregious as Cersei dying the way she died by Tyrion not killing her.
What's worse is Jaime leaving.
What Jaime decides.
Bran of Tarth.
Yes.
And just saying, character development, what character development? And just ending up where he started the whole show.
Which we ruined that prophecy of like little hands will kill her, which is you can either take as her children or literally small hands like Tyrion's will kill her. Which was a prophecy, right? That's when she saw.
I completely forgot about that. That was a really cool thing that she talked about.
That her kids, she would lose a couple of kids and then she would die by small hands is what the prophecy was, which didn't pay off. Having Jaime do that, which is obviously she's like besides Ramsay, which Battle of the Bastards might be the best episode of the whole show. Besides Ramsay, she was the next in line villain, right? Ramsay was the best villain. She was next in line. She was kind of the one that you wanted to see the big death from her too, just like Ramsay. And we got robbed of that. And then you have fucking Maisie Williams' character, I can't think of her name. She kills the Night King, which is fucking lame. You don't bring back Jon Snow and the whole time is like he's against the fucking like the wildlings, but then it really becomes the walkers, right? The watcher or whatever. And they literally have like standoffs where they're like looking at each other like we're gonna fucking fight one day. And if you don't have, you're telling me you don't have, okay, now I'm getting passionate. You tell me you don't have Jon Snow on a dragon fighting the Night King on an ice dragon. You're telling me that never crossed anyone's mind. It wouldn't be, and also would be one of the coolest, if not the coolest thing in Game of Thrones, period. They didn't do it. They had all the money in the world, and they didn't do that.
No.
I don't understand. There's a level of subverting expectations. But there's also a level of it's like there's a fine line there, like Star Wars, of like subverting expectations and also giving people what they want. And and you string them along for so long. Like I think to me the point of Game of Thrones is like I'm not, maybe not everyone would survive the end, but I think we're supposed to be a loss and accustomed to so much like sadness and like loss is at the end of it was supposed to be kind of, in my opinion, almost, like the good guys still win at the end. Like I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that was kind of like the trajectory. It was like one or two would still get out. And like that's the thing too. Who do you get? And we didn't even talk about this. Who do they give the fucking crown to? They give it to
that's what I was about to say. Yes.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Who has a better story than Bran the Broken? Oh man, it's just like again, it was like fan service. Let's have Tyrion make a speech like he's done many times in the show. It's not fan service.
It's like the opposite. Well,
it's like let's just try to repeat what worked last time and just like without the nuance or like the good intention. Let's just like have Tyrion give a flowery speech and then let's subvert expectations again and give it to Bran the Broken.
The thing is, and then John, you give it to John because John he's the way the prince that was promised. But B, you give it to John because he's the person who doesn't want it at all.
Sure.
And that's why you give it to him. The king, the leader who doesn't want it, but also respects tradition and duty.
2 seasons ago, Bran said, I can't, like when they were trying to have him lead the Stark house, he was like, I'm the 3-eyed raven. I can't be in those positions anymore, but I can be king.
Yeah, I mean, think about this. The guy, the guy who, they're like, he's impartial. He knows all of history, all these things, like, it's like Minority Report. Like, no, the guy who can see everyone's actions and the guy in the future is the worst guy because he's going to manipulate things for what he thinks is the benefit, not what the. I think if something's going to burn out, it needs to burn out like naturally. I don't think that.
And I'll just say too, I think they had things in the wrong order too. The Night King should have been the final episode. We should have dealt with Daenerys and the dragons and everything before that. Like. The show begins with Walker. The first scene of the show is Walkers, like those people in the soldiers in the woods running from the Walkers for the first, like seeing White Walkers for the first time, and that's begins the plot of the show. The show does not happen if the the events of the show don't take place without the White Walkers, right?
Right.
And I feel like that should have been the final. That would have been the final victory, right? Like. You deal with Daenerys, and maybe it is a defeat. Maybe you still have to kill her. Maybe she does like succumb to her just mental anxieties and pressure, and like then you have to find a way to rally everyone back together for one last stand, and then you barely do it, but then it becomes this we did it like that. That's the note to end the show on. That's how
there's something to say that the White Walkers come in when all the characters are at their lowest, and John's not at his lowest until Daenerys is dead or has gone bad.
Yes,
and like I understand, like I think it could do some convincing easily on like someone's part, but I could see sure, the White Walkers will be first, and then we can end on the throne, right? It's called Game of Thrones, but I think there's a hella argument and probably a much stronger one to be made that you're right, that they should end on the White Walkers. And like also it's like the big finale. I know there's their tradition of like in the episode before being the big finale, but like that it only really makes sense when you have another season coming. Right.
Yes. 100%.
That's why they do that. They do it with the big battle, and then the next episode is kind of like all the twists and turns, also teeing up the fallout for the next season.
So right, and so like you're just ending on this note of like ruining a fan favorite character with the bells. The bells were just ringing too loud. There was one less bell, or if they were just ringing a little quieter, would have been fine.
Yeah,
nothing would have happened. It's just one of those things. But I think it ends the show on this super sour. Like even if you just flipped, like you didn't even change anything else. You just made like same way you did it, but just flipped the order. It probably would have felt better. It would have felt
because John killed the Night King. Yes,
because the ends on Bran the Broken being king, John being banished, Arya saying what's west of Westeros, and I wanted to say, well, east if you go far enough. And then it's just like you get these just dissatisfying answers on unsatisfying answers, and it just becomes a shit sandwich. And that's the final episode, and it's just a shame. It's a great shame.
I really do wonder what it sounds like. The Jon Snow show Kit Harington is heavily involved, and he was almost like maybe pitched it. And so I
Yeah.
wonder if he's like, I didn't get my battle with the Night King, and maybe he fights the Night Queen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen it's funny because right after the show came out, all the actors, of course, they weren't going to say anything bad about it, right? Of course it was great, but since then, even recently, I think it was either Maze Williams or someone said, "Oh yeah, I watched it recently and it really fell off by the end," and it was and especially after, unfortunately, we had the actor, I can't think of his name, who played Tyrion, had some really dumbass remarks about saying that the only criticism was from misogynists for season 8. It was just I mean, I know you're probably saying that to kiss up to someone you're working with or something like that.
I don't understand that. Everyone was mad because she was not a strong character at the end. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he was just saying that bigots and idiots are the only people that had any issues at the end of Game of Thrones, and it's that could not be farther from the truth, Mr. Tyrion.
Yeah, I don't know that one. I don't know about that one.
But I think it is this thing where I'm sure Kit Harington was very aware of the response. I mean, we know, unfortunately, really feel sorry for him that he had drinking problems because of the pressure that he felt trying to deliver what he felt the fans were going to be expecting from him. Once he kind of became this pop culture icon, he started having drinking issues because of it.
I'm not sure I knew that.
And so I hope, and so I hope that he's doing all right with that, and I hope that I hope this isn't an obsessive way of I hope this is a healthy thing for him to be returning to this character, to try to do it justice rather than it being some kind of weird feeling inadequate or unworthy until he makes good on what the fans wanted or kind of thing,
If all else, he is in the MCU now as our boy Black Knight, and
which is a very similar character to Jon Snow, if we're being real.
Very similar, but I'm hoping that he gets his day in court, and I think he will. If Feige,
and I think
unfortunately he's in the worst performing movie in the MCU, in terms of
it's true
critically, and just
he's the best part of it. He's only in 10 minutes, so
yeah, it was during a pandemic, all those things. But I hopefully he's in Blade. We don't know yet, but hopefully.
I think he will. I'm optimistic for Snow. I don't think HBO will just greenlight anything, right? So I think if HBO's no, this isn't up to snuff, they're not going to.
Well, they shot
the Game of Thrones IP is too. They're trying to rebuild that IP. They're not going to do anything that they think might damage it again.
Yeah,
so,
again, that's my only thing. I just think that them kind of leaning into that I feel like they're smart enough not to bring it. They don't need to bring up the prophecy. Obviously, it's mainly a thing for the end for them,
world
to make
building
Aegon,
stuff, right?
To make Aegon the kind of the new king at the end. That's the twist that she hears it incorrectly.
It becomes
I feel like
plot point. Yeah,
it does, but I feel like they're smart enough. They clearly it. I don't know.
I think the thing you said, I hadn't really considered that, it being the Night King wasn't really gone, and it's I mean, it's kind of a Palpatine situation, but
it is.
They might be able to do, as long as we don't find out the Night King was still alive in Fortnite. I think we're on the right track.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Somehow the Night King has returned.
Yeah. I hope so.
But I think I could see that working. You know what I mean? Him having to kind of have this final battle that if he doesn't do it, the Night King it may take the Night King another 100 years, but he's just going to come back.
Right.
Kind of thing. I think that works.
Yeah, there's something cool about. I mean, even just me thinking about it as you were talking, of really bringing it down. I mean, obviously, I want dragon versus dragon, but there's a way where Jon Snow finds out that maybe it's trying to come back in some way. Yeah. At the very end, it's like a one-on-one battle. It's not armies. It's
he has
Jon Snow versus.
Maybe he's gonna have to go to he has to go to the spirit realm to fight him in spirit form, something like that, where it is yes, this is Jon Snow's quest, and it becomes his journey
Yeah.
as a character, and it's only about him trying to complete this kind of quest thing. And I think
This one thing, yeah,
yeah,
100%.
and I think you only need 2, maybe 3 seasons. We don't need 8. We need 2, maybe
exactly.
3, and tell us a solid story. I mean, it's Avatar: The Last Airbender, but with Jon Snow. He only has one goal that whole show, which is to defeat the Fire Lord and restore balance to the world.
Which, to be fair, was his only goal the last 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, roughly.
He had
his
some.
main
Well,
goal.
he had some goals about he was the Night Watch at one point, and then he became trying to unite the North, and then
once
trying
he came back, his goal was to everything was in service of stopping the Night King.
Sure.
Like it was like he had goals, that's the same thing this new
sub
show
goals. Sure,
but
yeah.
I have a feeling we could be writing a better show, or at least
yeah. I mean, I think to be okay, there's only 2 versions of a Jon Snow I think that even sound interesting. I think it's that, and I think it's like what I mentioned. I think it's this version of him trying to find a place in the world that he wasn't the chosen one he thought he was, and this kind of character that was told all that had all this importance placed on him that didn't pan out, and now he's got to figure out what to do with himself and what.
But I don't think that the thing is, I don't think why that doesn't work for me is that he never thought he was important, ever.
But everyone else did. Everyone else put this pressure on him by the end.
They well, I mean, I guess that
even being he was going to be the king consort, right?
But he never felt. It never felt like he was he said he felt like he has a duty, a job, and he's doing that because it's what's right, not because of anything else or any outside factors. It's a little weak sauce for me.
I mean, it is. I mean, I guess all in all, it needs to be him finding a new place in the world, and as long as you can write an interesting story with good characters, and
I mean,
and
the grief of killing Daenerys, the grief of killing,
exactly, him dealing with
losing his wife,
which all of that has to be in the show, no matter what. Either way the show goes.
100%. Yeah, it has to be. Anyway, Daniel, House of the Dragon, phenomenal show. I can't wait for more seasons, and I can't wait for them to retcon.
Only have to wait 2 years, so
1.5 years, 2 years. Yeah, we got a little bit to wait, which is kind of wild that they're not already. I don't know. I don't know what their production time is or when they stopped writing for when the last episode aired, but I wonder why they don't kind of, I don't know, have a 6-week break or whatever and get to writing again. I don't know why they had these.
I would assume they're probably pretty actively working on it, but schedules. I mean, there's a big cast.
Sure.
You got to get them all in the same place for probably a few weeks at a time. So,
You're right. Well, Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/2for1mail. We really covered the Game of Thrones gambit. I mean, I think at least a quarter or third of the show is us just reliving Game of Thrones season 8. So do you have anything else to throw on the pile? Throw it on. Anything else that bothered you about season 8? Because I know there's more. I mean, I could think of more if I tried. Or is there anything in the House of Dragon that you think we should highlight or that we missed or that you want to talk about? Let us know. bit.ly/241mail.
And if you can't hit us up in your bit.ly, you can always find us at youtube.com/241studios in the comment section below. The best place to consume the content. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in for episode 140 of Podcast 241. We are gearing up for our 3rd anniversary of the show. You can find us on all podcast services like Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and all the other ones we don't even know the names of. Again, thank you guys so much. Till next time. And my name is Donovan Thompson.
I am Daniel Wingfield.
And we have spoken.